Ado, Top Musica. Why am I coming around to do this one? Well, it's not just because it's part of our track by track listen through to One Piece Film Red, but you guys might know this is a little bit different from any of the other songs on this album because this one I actually heard back when it came out in 2022. So I have heard this song, but, and I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, I'll be honest, I've barely listened to it again since then. So it's been like nearly 4 years since I really sat down and listened to this one. And yeah, there could have been a bunch of other reasons. It could have been because there were other songs by Ado that grabbed my attention more, that I liked more. It could have been, as a general, as I mentioned, the songs from the One Piece Film Red soundtrack. As a general, I do think it's weird, really weird saying this now in retrospect, but I feel almost like I kind of avoided the ones from this album in particular, just because as it was like a soundtrack and I didn't really know what the deal was. And I mentioned I haven't really watched One Piece. I don't really watch anime that much, despite being in Japan for like so many years. You know, it was weird. I just think anything on the One Piece Red soundtrack, I almost kind of like avoided those songs because they felt more like they were soundtrack songs. Which is, I think that was completely subconscious rather than a conscious decision. But Top Musica, I knew it was like one of the, when it came to like overseas YouTubers, it was one of the first, if not the first song I really heard overseas YouTubers properly talking about that was getting buzz rather than just a couple of people picking it up. It was like, no, this thing really exploded. And at the time, I did a review of it. Now, I'm not going to go back and check out my review. I might do that later. But that was years ago. And that was at a time when this reaction channel was actually closed down due to problems with the band who shall not be named. And as a result, yeah, sort of coming back to this is very interesting. I'm coming back to this to really sort of pick up on a song that I perhaps did not give enough attention to at the time, didn't come back to enough afterwards, but now is sitting right in front of me as part of this track by track listen through. And whereas I'd usually skip it because I've already heard it before, it feels so distant to me. I mean, like literally right now, if you ask me, Howard, can you hum it? Not a chance. If you ask me, Howard, can you even tell me what kind of song it is? It just kind of, for me, it just disappears into the blur of other Ado songs. And I just think, oh, it's an Ado song. So I just think of stereotypical Ado qualities, you know, big expressive vocals, dark sounds and things like that. But I can't really say I remember enough about it to, yeah. So to me, it feels like I'm gonna probably recognize things when I start pressing play, but it does feel like I'm reintroducing myself to the song. And with the aid of context and hindsight, this is going to be very interesting. Because I know when I first heard the song, I was really impressed by Ado's voice, but I think I was still at that point where just Ado's voice as a general was such a wow factor that I didn't really pay that much attention to the music. I was still just getting used to Ado being Ado. So let's dive in, have a little listen. To be honest, I was going to say at the beginning of this, if I don't really feel I've got enough to say, or if it just becomes all like, oh yeah, I remember that, I won't post the video. But of course, if you're seeing this video, it means that I decided to post it. So clearly I did find enough within it to be worthy of comment. Let's go. This is Top Musica by Ado. Straight in with the voice. Big dramatic sort of synth sound in the background there, a bit of French horn part. Yeah, the production on this is superb. I'm loving the drama. It doesn't sound phoned in at all. It sounds really, really intense. Musically, it's very simple, but it's very much focused on these big, impactful sounds. Even the chugging of guitars, it's kind of got this marching, military drum beat feel to it. Interesting how the sound hasn't quite fully come in. Where's the snare? Where's the snare? It's great, but where's the snare? Oh, I love it for what it is. That was so good. That was so good. I have to. I hate to start with this, but I have to start. Where was the snare in the last chorus? It was. You could hear it, but it was really reduced. Look, that was amazing. I am actually quite surprised I haven't come back to this more often, because this is that kind of dramatic music where sometimes you just kind of like, you want something like this to zone out to. And I really, really think that is actually quite a bit more superb than I remember. And it's a song that it is, it's interesting because musically it's very, very simple. There's not a huge amount going on there, but it's instead, this feels like a soundtrack piece. And if you listen to like a lot of the most beloved and famous sort of soundtracks that we know, the big soundtracks from movies where they're really, really notable. It's not that there's anything super complicated in the writing. It's just that they picked the right sounds and they put them together in the right way. And it's just knowing how to deliver a certain emotional impact really well. And for me, this has that. This has that kind of like super, like just hits you like a wall of sound. And a lot of this is built from just the layering. I love that sort of big, deep kind of like a brass sound that comes in from the beginning, and then when the guitars come in again, the guitars are almost more percussive than anything. Just a lot of sort of sort of chugging sounds, but these big, thick chugging guitar sounds, mostly actually up in the mid-range to give a little bit more again of that percussive feel. However, this is all there just to give this kind of brooding, intense, warlike energy to everything. It definitely feels, I mean, like I say, when you hear those big brass sounds and that kind of distorted chugging guitar sound, it feels almost militaristic in its whole sound, which is interesting because, again, I have not seen the movie. I did, as mentioned after, I think it was like the first or second song that I did in this series of the One Piece Red soundtrack or Uta songs. I did actually look to get a rough idea for what the plot line was to try and understand what this character was, because I started to realize the character is the character from the movie is the character in all the music videos. So okay, there's clearly a lot more connection here. And then I started to realize that Ado's songs, they're not just soundtracks, but they are the songs that the character, I believe, sings. And my understanding, spoiler alert, is that the character is kind of like this all-powerful singer with kind of magical powers, but then it's kind of like this false utopia thing, and it all turns against her, and basically her beautiful music and her beautiful imaginary world actually ends up being something quite dark. And that is where something like this feels 100% on the money. This really feels like this is a song that captures that kind of darkness very well. So both knowing Ado's voice as well as I do now, and having a bit of a better understanding of what the context is of this, it really does feel very effective. Really like it. And again, I I understand now why musically this song is probably not very complex. It's a song that is not really, there isn't much in here that it would be considered complicated at all. But that's the point. It works very well because, as I've often said as well, simplicity can work if it's simplicity with a purpose, correctly orchestrated and produced. And it's just the choice of sounds, the impact, everything about that is great. The only thing that I think, again, I have to come back to this, and I apologise because it's a bit of a fly in the ointment, but I'm always honest when I do these reactions. We got to the last chorus and it built up to the last chorus, and then I was expecting, like, you know, that last chorus comes in, you get the big power of the kick and the chugging thing, and then that needed a heavy, like, double snare, or even, like, you just get, like, a taiko snare or something like that, or just a bunch of, you needed some kind of snare, and the lack of a snare felt like it hadn't come in properly. And don't get me wrong, again, I know you can have big, heavy beats without a snare, just kick-based, but not something like this where so much had been focused on the low sound. It's like this needed, like when that last chorus came in and you did the kick, and then you needed some sort of heavy, like, militaristic style snare sound. You needed that in there. So for me, that does, I can't deny it. And I know I'm going to get so much pushback because people always push back against these things. But this, for me, this feels like this song would have gone from like an 8 to a 10 if that last chorus had landed with as much punch as it needed to. But the lack of, like, the kick not being balanced out by something heavy landing on the snare part of the beat, for me, actually that sapped all of the drama out of the last chorus. Not all, but it sapped a significant amount of the punch and the drama out of the last chorus. I was really surprised by that. I don't want to call it an oversight, because clearly the person who constructed this was very talented. And that was clearly their intention, but I would love to know why they... I understood not going too heavy on that earlier in the song, but not having that at the end felt really off to me. Gotta be honest. So absolutely loved this, really adored this. I do think I'm going to struggle, and maybe this is something that I've noticed this when I talk to other people who've worked doing songwriting professionally, and it's something that does come up, is that sometimes when you listen to a song, you hear what you think, you hear what's missing rather than just what you feel about what's already there. And so I wonder if this is something where I'm saying this from my perspective and other people maybe don't think like that. But I have to assume there's nothing special about my brain. I assume we all kind of do this to a bit, but I've been told that some people who do songwriting tend to think that way and others don't. But to me, I hear that and I hear something missing in the last chorus, which I think might affect re-listens for me. Just being totally honest. I'm not saying it's an objective statement, that's just my perspective on this. But I will say, with all of that considered, I would still enjoy listening to this just because of how superb it was. This was an absolutely brilliant piece of music. Ending slightly lets it down. Looking at the replays, seems most people disagree with me. But I will say that as a song, this was brilliant, super effective. As a soundtrack piece, actually, that's an interesting thing. Of all the songs we've heard so far, they all kind of make me interested to hear how they fit into the movie. This is the first one that actually makes me interested to watch the movie, because it's got so much emotional impact that I just kind of feel like, oh, whatever scene this goes to must be a fucking doozy of a scene. You know, I would really like to see this. I mean, it's probably quite a dolcy scene in all fairness, but I would definitely want to see this one. But yeah, absolutely, I got to be absolutely brilliant. As always, I'm 100% honest, so I gave you my one criticism there. But yeah, brilliant. And I don't think there can be a greater compliment to give this than the fact that this absolutely makes me want to watch the movie. And do you know what? I'm saying all of this, I forgot to even address the original point, which is that obviously I was wondering, would this just feel familiar? Like I've heard it before. Funny thing is, I do now somewhat remember that I remember thinking this was a very soundtracky song. And that might have once again been one of the reasons why I didn't really come back to it. Because it feels more soundtracky than song. But now I think the context makes this so much more rewarding. So that was brilliant. And yeah, I feel very happy to give a review on this because I definitely did not remember it well enough to go into any more. But anyway, the next one is The World's Continuation. So we'll continue with that ourselves. And until we do, and until I hopefully very soon see you back here in Japan for the next one of these. Well, I'm not in Japan right now, but you get my point. I'm in Korea. But until I do, for now, ciao, ciao.